add Farhan, we have talked. Somebody has signed in just like iPhone, so you can't recognize the person. But great. So I'll assume, that all our people are here. And it's about time I'm going to kick it off with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and Assalamu Alaikum to all my friends from all over. And this is a very, very interesting topic. So now, are you going to share some slides with us?
No slides, sir. Just a discussion with all the esteemed panelists.
The issue of, sexual harassment at the workplace, it has been a very, very common issue, and it's been there since most of the time people started working in organizations. There have always been these issues, especially in Pakistan and developing countries where conventionally women did not used to work in offices. It was a relatively new phenomenon. So obviously we can very safely, and we did assume that the male population here was not properly oriented and trained to work in an environment where there are ladies and they are also co-workers. So this interaction was very alien to most of our local population, and this led to this kind of confusion. And there have been, and there still are, instances in the workplace sexual harassment. What intrigues me is that it is not only the corporate work environment where we have this problem, and that's why we have our experts, and Sana will, I'm sure, dilate the topic to cover most of the thing. It's there mostly in the rural environment. In the smaller towns and cities, we have a feudal culture. It's a way of life there. And even in the smaller villages, even in the workers' community, sexual harassment and now very commonly experience of rape, etc. And, not even just simple rape, but gang rapes becoming so common, so common. So I did a little bit of, just for my own understanding. Unfortunately, I couldn't. This has been a crazy period from my work point of view. I couldn't do the real analysis that I wanted to do for you. But I encourage you all to go and do this on the web. So I was wondering, which is the country where
it's 6 o'clock.
Which is the country where this is a very, very common happening, or highest? And I was surprised to see that both violence, sexual violence, harassment is most common in America. And I reflect that why a society where sexual discrimination, even from school days, they are trained to live and work with female, and they have all the education, they have the values that we talk about, unfortunately, in that society. So on one extreme, you see a highly educated Western society where this is a very, very common incident, and it happens. And I'm not going to go into the details of the dynamics. Is it the black or is it the white, or it's a combination? It is there in the society. On the other hand, then I look at which is the other biggest country where this is so common, and it's becoming actually, now it's gone into a state where one can really, it's a worrying thing, is India. And you look into the data, you can just go and Google and see. I have done it, and I've seen the data, and you look into that, and what you see is it's very, very high, mostly now in urban areas, and Delhi is an epicenter of this crime. So again, a moment to reflect what happened in the society, which was a very tolerant and very, very peaceful society, and we believe a different set of values there, and I don't know what. So I just leave the panel with these two divergent issues and challenges. One, educated Western society. B, the conventional society, very conventional society, or like India. This is happening, and it's happening in very, very common way. We look at, then we look at the thing that's going on here in Pakistan. And what we see now is it has gone more into, the child rape cases, and they are becoming so common. And, one of the things that is there, and again, I thought, well, that it is in our area, but one of the things that is there is in society, the latecomers are joining. Okay. So one of the things that has started happening very commonly now is unreported cases. So we see that there are cases in the middle class societies. God forbid something like that happens, then people are convinced, okay, don't go to the police, don't make a case out of it. There is nothing going to happen, and you have this problem. Secondly, if you go to the even to the educated society, I'm not sure how many of the people really take this chance and just jump into the situation and volunteer to go and report. So this is a dilemma that we are living with. We have serious issues here, and people are not reporting. So whatever reported data, even that is very, very scary. Now, we also worry why in a country like Pakistan, where we claim Islam and Islamic values, unfortunately, we don't see anything being practiced here. So there's a lot of controversy on Islamic values. What do they really want? What do they suggest? And what we're doing. So we're living in a very, very complex society where, unfortunately, there is a phenomena of sexual harassment in the workplace, and I'm taking a step further, in the society. This is happening, and this is very scary. Why it is scary? Because it is not happening at the same pace that we have experienced. It is going up in a geometrical progression. Perhaps the reports are becoming more, or perhaps, people have become more conscious. They have started. Another factor is the media factor. Now we did not have this media factor. So any report and every report, if there is anybody with a camera, it's an online transmission station, and they make it known to everybody. So we're sitting with a very challenging thing for our society, even in the urban society. I mean, even the place where I live, defense. It's not that in a very isolated area. We heard that case of a very unfortunate incident on the motorway. But even in society, defense society, the other day I was reading 2-3 days back that a girl driving from main road, it's like an identified upclass area, and people who live here are normally seen as class belonging to an affluent class, and this is happening so common. So today, actually, I heard Sana's presentation in a Rotary Club, and I was very excited because she had some fascinating aspects of legal side of it and all to share. And I suggested to her that let's hold this. This is an important thing. We, our Learning Forum HR, can create some discussion to probably take it broader scale and let people know about it, greater awareness, and whatever we can do to address the big challenge. So I will hand you over, and from here you will not hear me. I'll just be there, it will be quiet. It's going to be Sana Pirzada. Sana, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Sir Zafar. First of all, thank you so much for that brilliant introduction which you gave a while back, and also this wonderful overview about the topic that we'll be discussing today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Sana Pirzada. I'm a barrister and I'm a writer, and I've been associated with Accelerate Private Limited since the past, 6 years or so. This gentleman who has so wonderfully spoken about me, Sir Zafar, is my boss, and I think he is just being a little humble. We would obviously want to hear a lot from him during the course of this webinar. So a warm welcome to you all. I know that there are some panelists who are joining us from abroad, and thank you so much for being here, and for the others as well.
Can I just take a moment? I just forgot it. This little girl, I shouldn't say little girl, the big girl, Hira Ali, you see here, she's come from London, she's based in London. She's a woman right champion, activist, and she has taken a global role now. She's also written a book, very, very popular book now for ladies, Her Way Up. And, she's motivating people, ladies, to come on and, develop their career. So, Hera, you can just say hello in a few words and then over
Hello,
back.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. Yes, my book is called Her Way to the Top, A Guide to Smashing the Glass Ceiling. And it has one whole chapter on sexual harassment. Thank you so much, Sana and Zafar for inviting me. Zafar has been my mentor for years. I think I can't even remember how long. But it's just been, I've learned so much from him. And yes, I'm really, really glad to be here and to contribute to this really important discussion, which is very close to my heart. I've been speaking about this since the past particularly the past few weeks, but of course, since a couple of years now. So yeah, glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, just one thing, your mic is not working very well.
Oh, it's not? Let me fix it.
It is working, but it's not very effective.
Okay, I'm going to fix this. So can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yeah, it's much better.
Yes, so thank you. I'm not going to repeat myself. I'm not going to take the time, but thank you for inviting me. Sexual harassment is a topic which is close to my heart. I've been speaking about it since a very long time, and I have a whole chapter in my book addressed towards sexual harassment. I've launched a campaign recently through one of my company's international women empowerment events. It's called Her Allies. And I do speak a lot about the role of male allies in supporting all these initiatives. So I am really happy to be here and with these amazing panelists and with you, Zafar, particularly. You're my mentor and I've learned so much from you. So yeah, thank you for having me, inviting me.
Thank you so much. Okay, Sana, sorry, no more interruptions.
No, not at all, sir. Feel free to interrupt as and when you want. So before I actually start discussing certain aspects of this topic with the panelists, I just have a few things to say about sexual harassment. First of all, ever since women have actually entered the professional sphere, I'm not just talking about one particular region, I'm talking about an international perspective over here. For decades and decades, there have been cases of sexual harassment. Now, there have been reforms, there have been legal reforms and other social reforms which have taken place and are still in fact taking place on a piecemeal basis. But what we've seen is that there is a stigma attached with sexual harassment, and women who have actually experienced it were afraid to come forward. We saw that with the hashtag #MeToo movement. Women were quiet for decades and then they eventually turned up. Strangely enough, in 2020, this is still happening. And we will, of course, look at the reasons behind this, the psychological aspect of why women don't come forward. What are the loopholes within the legal framework, so to speak? We will, of course, be looking at all sorts of dimensions, both within Pakistan and outside. When we talk about sexual harassment, we're talking about a number of different things. So we're talking about verbal abuse, we're talking about the psychological aspect, the social aspect, the emotional aspect. We will also look at some behaviors within workplaces that constitute to sexual harassment. Oftentimes what happens is that victims of sexual harassment aren't even aware of the fact that they're being harassed. What they are unaware of is the fact that certain actions that they are being confronted with actually amount to harassment. What they're unaware of is that they have a legal recourse. They're unaware of the statute or the prevalent laws that exist and what they can do about the situation. And that is something that I'd actually like the panelists, especially the legal experts over here, to highlight during the course of this session. There are just some statistics which I'll just very briefly point out before we move forward. So the Federal Ombudsman for Protection Against Harassment of Women in Pakistan actually reported that between 2018 to 19, 309 cases were reported of sexual harassment by women. Now, whether these women were successful in their complaints or not, we will find out during the course of this webinar. Firstly, thank you so much for listening to me very patiently. We will now officially kick off this session, and I would actually like to start with Shanta, who is joining us from South Africa. And Shanta, thank you so much for being here. Shanta is a counselor and a mental health expert, and she has helped rural women. And Shanta, I would like you to kindly shed some light on the psychological aspects of this dilemma. You know, why don't people come forward? And you know, what do you have to say about this?
Sana, thank you so much, and Zafar bhai, thank you so much for recommending that I join this. You mentioned that the rural woman. Now, I'm going to take you back to a time when I was an HR manager for a very large corporate. And it was pretty difficult when there was an allegation. And the director, I was his 2IC, and he calls me into the office. And he said, you know, it's all about profit and sex sells. Needless to say, I didn't last in that organization very much longer, because the other thing was the party atmosphere, where every Thursday we had parties. And one of my staff members came to me and gave me explicit details of the boardroom being used as a bed. So I've seen that side of it. Then as an educator, I've seen it with my students being sexually harassed by teachers. I've seen it with my colleagues being sexually harassed by principals. And then in my private capacity as a counselor, and also the fact that I'm associated with Lifeline Pietermaritzburg, and I am on the board of an NGO called VUCA Way. Now, VUCA means wake up in isiZulu, and Way is women and youth. And we're taking empowerment to the rural community. Now, why do people do this? As far as I'm concerned, if there's nothing wrong with the brain physiologically, there is no excuse. If there is a physiological thing, you know what? Go and see a psychiatrist, get your GP to recommend you, go and see a neurologist, have something done. But 9 times out of 10, I have noticed that it's a power game.
Absolutely.
And it's power over the minorities. Now, I don't know how liberated this group is with regard to talking about LGBT and Q, but very often you find that a person who is lesbian is raped by a straight man or hit on to prove something, to prove his ego. And then the worst thing I've seen, and this was a shocker to me, was where I saw a woman, not a woman, it happened a few times, hitting on other women and even hitting on younger men in organizations, right? So to me, it's just lust, it's the want of power, it's the want to dominate, right? Now, there were things that you brought up about betrayal, and I'd like to very quickly go through how I handle it when it's brought to me in a private capacity. And I must make it clear that when it's a sexual harassment case minus rape, I will handle it in my personal capacity. But once it involves rape, I do it under an NGO's banner, because there's no ways I want my office to be identified. So if it's done under the NGO banner, you don't know which person has done it there, and you know the NGO has looked after it. So yeah, the 5 things that I ask a client to do is to write a story first. No emotions, don't give me connotations, just give me hard fact. That's all. I want you to write down exactly what happened, similar to what happened in the corporate that I worked at. And you know, I got the whole details of a boardroom table, so much so that I cannot look at a boardroom table in any decent way. You know, there's always that suspicion that comes into me. Then you ask the person to write down what effects this harassment has had on them. So they write down the hardcore, they write down the effects. Now, this is something that you don't see. It's only when they are ready to share it with you in the session that they give it out. And if I don't do it that way, Nida, I noticed your head was nodding. If we don't do it that way, very often it becomes just somebody wanting to explain certain things we don't even need to know. So when they write it, and then they look at it, and then they talk about it, it's like a better understanding comes to them, right? So that's the third thing I ask them to do, is to share the experience with me. Once they do that, then I go on to brainstorming self-care strategies. Right? So it's either now, one of the things with the self-care is we're going ahead and we're reporting it. Or if you don't want to, because of family shame, because of husband knowing, because of, and if you're a man and you've been abused by your female boss, it's humiliating for you. How do you tell your wife that I've been abused? You can tell your counselor that, you know, but how do you go back and tell your wife? So we look at self-care strategies, right? And that goes hand in hand with going the legal route. And after that, you take action, because it's either you're going to work with me and we're going to work through this, or we're going to work with the law through this. So those are the options, you know, I give people, etc. Zafar, you brought up something about communities, that it's happening in Pakistan, in India now at an escalated rate. I meet every Friday with a commission that's run by Stanford University. It's a Gandhi King International Foundation. And we've realized that the only reason why other countries appear to have this on the up now is that they are making it known. But it has been happening. I go back to the Maghreb area, you know, the North Africa area. And when I was abroad, I helped some students with the international relations with that. The woman in those areas, the senior woman, if the younger woman came to them and complained, they made it very clear, we've earned our stripes and we are not going to support you. So this has been happening, but society has been, you know, covering it up. Now, because of social media, people are feeling more at liberty to mention it and, you know, to bring it out into the open. And also sexual harassment, you look at the music of today. There's some English songs that just drove me ballistic. There are some songs that imply, you know, penetration. It implies a whole lot of things. And I watch little kids dancing to it. I watch TikTok to it. Where are the parents? What are they doing? You know, so to me, protect your child at home, protect your child first, and give your child that empowerment at home. And it's never too early to tell a child, this is wrong, don't allow it to happen to you. So there's a whole lot of things that, you know, that are happening now. And I know I've got limited time, but I could go on with a whole lot of histories about this. Lastly, just tell you, I had one case where it was a foreigner to South Africa. And someone along the line influenced him to come and see me. And I'm very, very culture sensitive. So he came to me and he told me that his boss's wife has hit on him. Boss's wife, who's driving one of the poshest Mercedes, right? But she's hit on this youngster. And if he opens his mouth, he will be the one in prison. So we look, there's so much of injustice to this that it just, you know, it makes my blood curdle. But it's not only men on women. It's now become the powerful over the powerless minority. I hope I've covered whatever you needed, Sana.
That's absolutely excellent, Shanta. And I think that you're right. We could literally just go on listening to you because you bring with you, you know, a tremendous wealth of wisdom and stories. And there is so much that we can learn from you. And there are just some key points over here that I think are absolutely essential and actually are a problem in our part of the world because in our part of the world, as I mentioned a little while ago, harassment itself is a stigma. But another stigma is mental health and visiting counselors and psychiatrists. And I think that that is something that needs to be commonplace over here now in our part of the world, and generally as well everywhere in the world, which I think in Western countries it probably is. And even within organizations, there should be at least a couple of counselors, especially for female victims. And you're right, even if they're male victims, they might feel oppressed. They might not want to actually go out and disclose these details. So there should be a neutral party to be able to deal with the psychological aspects, which is actually a problem. I mean, we jump to the legal aspects, but we tend to fail in the psychological dimensions. But no, thank you so much for highlighting all of that. And you're absolutely right. It is a power struggle at the end of the day. It's the powerful against the oppressed, whether it's a man against a woman or a woman against a man.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely right. Hira, I think that that takes me to you. And I've actually had to write down a few of your credentials because it was hard for me to actually remember everything that you've done or you've accomplished, mashallah. So Hira is the Managing Director of International Women Empowerment Events. I think if I make a mistake, just correct me. Okay. You're also the author of a very successful bestseller called Her Way to the Top, and you're a registered coach as well. So Hira, I was reading a bit about you, and in your book you've mentioned about 300 responses that you've taken from women. So could you tell us a little bit about those scenarios, and especially pertaining to harassment?
Perfect. So in my book, and I started my career in Pakistan, and then I moved to Dubai, and then I moved to London. So I have been exposed to a lot of different work environments, and I could see a specific set of gender derailers holding women back, whether it was Asia, whether it was Pakistan, Dubai, Middle East, London, and Europe. And when I came here, Sana, the first thing which I noticed was when I came to London, I thought I have moved to this empowered city where women will be breaking glass ceilings and, you know, everything is going to be in place. And I was shocked because the first week there was the Women's March going on. And I said, what are they marching for, right? And that's when I realized that women here too face very similar challenges. Of course, in Pakistan, in countries, all of the countries in India, their external challenges are much more stronger than the internal challenges. So in my book, I interviewed 300 women just to verify whatever experience I had and just to authenticate it. And 300 women globally responded, and they identified 10 things which hold them back in their career. So the 3 external challenges that were identified were misogynist, systemic racism, and well, not racism, sorry, in case of gender, is gender discrimination. But of course, yeah, if you're a woman of color, then you face the double or the triple whammy. So it was that gendered sort of work environment, lack of infrastructure. You are living in or working in an environment which is predominantly made for men. So women were struggling with that. The second was harassment, and it was not just sexual harassment, it was also bullying, and it was just workplace bullying in general. And then the third thing was, of course, a lack of infrastructure, sexual harassment, and then the third thing was misogyny and sexism, which exists in different work structures. So the thing about sexual harassment was, what I noticed here in UK was that a lot of women here too, even in the West, because they have been socially conditioned, and particularly women in the East, we have been raised to act nice, to be nice, to do their, if you know the word lihaz in Urdu, right? That, women should always not speak out of turn, they should be submissive, they should be sweet, they should be polite. And because of that, a lot of women dismiss any harassment that happens at the workplace, particularly because most people think it is explicit rape which needs to be reported. If it's not, if it's not rape, it's not like Shanta mentioned, if it's not physical, or if it's harmless banter, then that should be avoided. Even though research has proved that even verbal sexual harassment has a very negative impact on women's psyche, and it really slows their career progress. And we have, as women, first need to identify that if there is somebody, you know, and sometimes I think it's all about creating awareness. So if there's somebody who's calling you names like sweetheart or darling, or touching your shoulder, or, you know, grabbing you, a lot of times we say, well, you know, you probably didn't mean it, or, you know, he probably meant it well, and I'm probably exaggerating, but that's not true. Anything which makes you uncomfortable. And sometimes I know these little girls who I mentor in different schools in London, they would automatically dismiss and say, well, you know what, maybe we're exaggerating. No, you're not exaggerating. If you are feeling uncomfortable, if the other person has made you uncomfortable, then it is probably harassment. So I'm going to also share an article I wrote on it. I mean, I'm sure I can't compare with the legal, you know, panelist over here because I don't have the exact legal knowledge, but there are different scenarios which do come under sexual harassment, and we have to identify and know that these are the things which you have a right to say no to. There was a woman here in UK who said, I haven't been exposed to harassment as such, but my boss regularly talks about things which makes me uncomfortable. And he talks about other people's sexual experiences. Is that harassment? Yes, it is harassment. Anything which is not directly, you know, if it's not directed at you, but at the same time, it's making you feel uncomfortable. Even if you walk in an office and if there are pictures or magazines or anything as such, which is making you feel uncomfortable, that also comes under harassment. I think, sadly, this is what we fail to understand. We believe that harassment is only rape or something, you know, something if somebody is physically grabbing you. But there is, I think, not a lot of emphasis given to sort of verbal sexual harassment, because they do exist. That does exist, and that is in fact even more harmful for women and their psyche, because these gender microaggressions, you know, these sexist jokes. We have seen this after the motorway incident. It was sad, right? I mean, you could see politicians standing in the, you know, in the National Assembly and saying that, well, we built the motorway. I mean, who cares? We are talking about a rape incident. There were rape memes being circulated. There were rape jokes being circulated. There were celebrities who were minimizing the Me Too campaign. And then, you know, unfortunately, I do have a lot of respect for religious scholars, but then there are people who feel that, you know, the reason why all this is happening is because women are not, you know, a lot of victim blaming. You know, it's probably because they are not doing their part or they are not covering up. So victim blaming is one of the major issues globally. And this is not just in Pakistan. This happens in UK too. And, you know, Shanta has been describing all these you know, services which she provides. And unfortunately, I'll share this with you. I am in UK. I regularly interact with, you know, rape survivors. And even in Scotland, even in UK, you don't have the services available. So again, it is a global problem. Of course, in Pakistan and, you know, in India and Bangladesh, it's much worse, right? And, you know, it's much more difficult for, and even when you see when the Me Too campaign was going on, it was difficult for people in the East to sort of say anything, because the moment they did, we have seen examples of women who have raised concerns and how they have been shamed because people were like, why didn't you do this before? And where's the proof? You don't always have proof, right? And you have to understand, women, you know, it's a difficult thing for women to actually come up and speak up and say that this happened with me. So our first reaction is to dismiss it, to blame the victim and say, okay, what was she wearing? What was she saying? What was she doing? Where was she traveling? You know, everything else. And I think that is the biggest problem in all cultures, is when you refuse.
Thank you, Hira. You brought in some very interesting dimensions. You know, I think what you're suggesting is,
yes,
look into the social and cultural response to women, the way they come across. And, you know, I think I'll again request, we have, mashallah, the legal side. No, I know, I mean, you're so passionate about it.
Go on and on.
I really, really appreciate all that enthusiasm and emotion that's flowing out. And it's a treat to listen to you. And we could do that for hours. And maybe one day we could do that one session with you. But we have other esteemed experts. One is from the, like Shanta, from the psychology side of it. And the other is from legal. So I leave Sana to please proceed ahead with the whatever side you decide now.
Hira, firstly, thank you so much for your brilliant insights. Before I move on, just one thing to say, you're absolutely right. In the UK as well, I also lived in the UK, and thankfully I never encountered anything firsthand, but I did work somewhere which was also within the legal system. And I remember that there was an issue over there of sex discrimination. And the result was that actually the women had to sign a gagging order at the end of that. And they were paid a certain amount of compensation by the boss. And it was just very unfortunate to have found out that something like a gagging order exists even in the UK, which you're absolutely right, is a country that I look up to, and I just feel like it is the champion of human rights and all sorts of rights, equality of women. But then this is a pandemic in a way, you know, sexual harassment and issues against women. But thank you so much, Hira. We would love to learn a lot more from you, but in a little while. Now, actually, this is a very good point to move on to you, Nida. And Nida, thank you so much for being here. Nida is the founder of the Women in Law Initiative. I'm sorry that I've actually written all this down because we have so many successful panelists over here that I can't even remember their credentials. And Nida is a lawyer. She has been working towards equality in the legal profession. So Nida, can you just enlighten us that when we talk about the legal profession and we talk about sexual harassment, what sort of challenges exist over here in Pakistan?
I'm so sorry, Sana. Your voice broke off. Could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, sure, Nida. So I was saying, Nida, from the legal perspective over here, and being the head of the Women in Law Initiative, what is your take on sexual harassment or women within the legal field? What are the sort of challenges that exist? What have you faced? What would you like to shed some light on that?
Oh, absolutely. There, I mean, like every other panelist and every other woman, I think I also have a lot to say, but I'll try to keep myself to the point and as concise as possible. First of all, Zafar Saab, USA is no great example when it comes to human rights as of late, and recently, you know, their track record has been really disappointing. So we should not be expecting great things out of USA, especially as far as women rights are concerned, because you know, their situation really is, you know, if not worse, then as bad as ours. Secondly, I tend to agree with Shanta and with what Hira have also spoken about harassment, that it is definitely about power. And also the cultural sort of response to this behavior is what is the basic reason why we haven't really been able to effectively deal with it, despite there being certain laws that have been enacted. And a lot of that, even in the chat box, I was reading that, you know, somehow we expect too much from the value system. But I guess we give too much credit to the value systems. And I feel that, in fact, a lot of our cultural values, the archaic cultural values, which are coming from a very patriarchal point of view, actually reinforce those imbalances. And therefore, you know, cause these challenges for us at workplace, because when women reclaim public spaces, whether it be a street, whether it be the motorway, or whether it be the workplace, and because our focus is today about managing harassment at workplaces, so I'll try and focus on that. The problem is that there's not enough exposure or understanding of accepting women in the public space, because the patriarchal values put women's place in the home. And therefore, when you have a woman in a public place, then of course the men around her, and even she herself, is not fully aware or equipped or trained to handle or sort of, you know, manage that situation and how that interaction is going to take place. So it becomes a very difficult position for people to understand how to actually interact in a way that is normal or that is professional. So we have a dearth of professional sort of ethics and training, and, you know, no experience as such of dealing with, you know, the opposite gender at our workplaces. And I think the reason for that is that a lot of it has got a lot to do with segregated schools. segregated environments. And I'm not saying that one is bad and the other is good, but it's basically about whether, even if you have a segregated environment, I believe that it's important to teach certain professional ethics and the value of notions such as consent, so that people have that grounded training in terms of respecting the other person. And you cannot treat a woman any less, or bring up a child with the notion that, okay, a woman's space is in the home, because obviously until you address these issues at home and you recognize the full autonomy of a woman, which obviously the Constitution of Pakistan guarantees, as do all the human rights instruments. So in Article 25, you have equality before the law as an equal citizen, and there can't be any discrimination in terms of accessing equal opportunities. But unfortunately in Pakistan, there's a lot of issue of how these concepts are stigmatized, often to maintain the status quo and the power imbalances. And a lot of times these tactics, whether it be sexual harassment or any sort of other discriminatory practices against women, are basically because men or those in the power corridors don't really want you to take a slice of the pie of those public spaces, and they want to put you back in your place because of, I don't know, share insecurities of sharing the workspace. And why? Because obviously there's more competition. There have been so many reports that if women do join labor force, they will be adding so much to the GDP and all, but obviously that puts the mediocre men, right now, of course, I am talking about those men in particular, but that doesn't mean all men. So I'm specifically talking about those men who are in these big offices, but they don't have the merit or the real basis for being in those positions. And of course, they are the ones who are most threatened by a competent lady who's coming, after so many struggles and other challenges, of course, on her merit. But there are other examples, like, Shanta also mentioned that it can be reverse as well. So I'm not ruling those out. And ultimately, it is about dominance, it is about consent. And as far as Pakistan is concerned, as far as the legal framework is concerned, and women's, experiences, female lawyers' experience in courts are concerned, again, it's about being able to take away the stigma away and recognize what attitudes actually can be classified as harassment. So I'll tell you, a sacred word like mashallah was used to check out a girl, and she was walking from her court towards her car. She had done her case, and this young man, who's also a lawyer, her colleague, maybe they're not working together, but they are at a workplace where both of them present their cases, and they're crossing each other's path, and this young man just utters mashallah in a way which is very sleazy, which is putting the woman in a very uncomfortable position. So even that is something which can constitute sexual harassment. Not that he's using some sort of a language or vocabulary that is actually lustful, but like a basic, sacred, simple religious word, a very sacred word, is also being sexualized that way, which is very, very problematic. So but when you ask a lot of women in the courtrooms, because of the stigma attached to it, and because they also have to ultimately survive in the male-dominated profession, they will also not be in a position to, or will not recognize that whatever is happening to them is harassment or is sexual harassment, because sexual, the word itself, is really stigmatized. And in the Pakistani, like again, I would say it is reinforced by the culture to not so openly talk about this concept. And when women now have started, of course, and I give full credit to this generation, the younger generation, for taking back the terminology and for using it openly and fully calling spade a spade, and finally reclaiming that language as well, which it is. And a lot of our senior female lawyers do not do that. They do not own it up, because they say that, okay, we have to survive. And they would say कि नहीं जी, वो it's about us, and because they're made to believe that it's about how they conduct themselves and what they do that is going to, ensure that they are not, facing any harassment. But sometimes I'm looking at them and, this blatant harassment happening right in front of my eyes, and they will not have the sense or the training or the himmat or the, just the sheer strength to recognize that this is what it is. And I feel that is where our justice system, our lawyers, our judges, seem to have, our system, our police officials for that matter, as we've seen in the CCPO instance in the motorway case, and even our higher, office bearers in the government. The PM himself, I feel, is not very well aware of, the violence against women and why it happens. So I feel that there is a lack of appreciation and training of this at a very conceptual level, at an ideological level, at a conceptual level, because shuru se training nahi hoti hai. There's no early childhood training or talk about these concepts because it's taboo to be talking about these.
Awesome points, Nida. Awesome. Again, fascinating. I mean, it's such a treat to listen to you girls and bringing in such interesting dimensions. Even I am now scared to say mashallah to, anybody here wants to say, if somebody's looking good, there is a choice. Whether you just, as a man, as a human being, you just keep shut, or you at least say, wow.
It's the tone also, you can tell, like, it's not just the word. No, of course, it's how it's said, the tone, the pitch. Yeah.
And the looks.
Trust me, I'm a man, I know that. It's the tone that makes a difference.
Yes.
And then, sorry, Sana, your next legal, before we move to the next one, I just want to, ladies and gentlemen, tell you, I'm very, very happy to welcome Mr. Kamran Rizvi, one of the leading HR and management professionals who is right here. He's quiet, and I'm hoping that, at some point in time in the end, I'll request him to say a few words, but he's a real guru, management guru of Pakistan. So thank you, Kamran, for being here. Nida, sorry, Sana, can you please carry on with your panel?
So Nida, firstly, thank you so much for bringing in all of those insights, especially the sneak peeks from the Pakistani courtrooms and that example that you highlighted, which I'm sorry, it made me laugh, but it was funny, but it was also a reality because these things happen. And the lady in question was a lawyer, so she was able to identify that particular comment and the way that it was said constituted harassment. But the point is that a lay person wouldn't know that, and a lay person would even be fearful of approaching, as you rightly said, the police, and every layer within our legal/justice system in Pakistan has issues, and we are afraid of actually going ahead with anything that perturbs us. Now, I'm going to move on to Ummar Ziauddin. And Ummar, thank you so much for being here. Just a little bit about Ummar. He is a barrister as well as a law lecturer. I also work with Ummar, so in a way he is my boss. I don't know if that's the right way of defining our professional relationship, but he is the dean of the institution that we work for. So Ummar, thank you so much for being here. Now, we have heard so many different dimensions, social, psychological, etc., and international dimensions as well. As a barrister, Ummar, can you please shed some light on any cases that you might have actually dealt with firsthand? And if you can just highlight the legal mechanisms and the ombudsman's office, etc., and whatever happens, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sana, for having me over, and Zafar for inviting for the discussion. And no, Sana, it's not an appropriate way of describing our professional relationship. We're colleagues and we work together for a cause which is far bigger than ours. I've been a practicing lawyer and in the course of my professional career, I've had the opportunity to represent both the complainant as well as the accused or the respondent before the tribunal. My perspective obviously is limited in a way because I'm trained as a lawyer and insight that I'd like to share, and it's obviously based purely on my experience here in Pakistan. Very briefly, insofar as the procedure is concerned, the Act of 2010 whoever is a victim of sexual harassment, that person, and it could be male or female, that person could lodge a complaint before the inquiry committee, the organization, or before the ombudsperson. Our law still writes ombudsman. We've had a female ombudsperson in office for quite some time. Perhaps we need to revisit our laws. And within 3 days of the complaint, the ombudsperson or inquiry committee has to conduct an inquiry. It will have the same powers as any other civil court would, can examine witnesses, record, allow for cross-examination under the due process clause of our constitution. And then, and this is where the problem is. The organization, if it finds the accused or the respondent guilty, from issuing minor penalties starting with censure, can impose a major penalty which amounts to dismissal from service, except that the same powers are not vested with the ombudsperson as well. And this is where we feel that there's a gap in our existing laws, and the ombudsperson or ombudsman should have same powers as the competent authority of the organization. Based on my experiences, you use the word stigma, and stigma goes both ways. For the complainant, obviously, the person is concerned that the information should not go up public, and yes, there are powers to keep the proceedings confidential, and it should be kept confidential given our cultural constraints. Insofar as the respondent is concerned, the issue is that of presumption of guilt. So in our society, what happens is you lodge a complaint, invariably one starts to believe that that person is guilty even before the due process has taken place. And this is where we need to, even though we are passionate about the issue, even though we feel it is wrong, and it is wrong, yet our constitution allows for the due process to take place. Even for your jet black terrorist, you have a due process clause, and people who are accused of harassment or sexual harassment must have their day before the tribunal or in the court as well before we jump to conclusions. So this is important. I mentioned this presumption of guilt because we've already seen a catastrophe that took place in October last year. Professor of MAO College was cleared by the inquiry committee, nonetheless was not given the exoneration from the college, ended up committing suicide. So we have to be very careful because of the element of stigma that goes both ways. What I've seen is people are still very reluctant to flag the issue of harassment, especially the victims. And this is where, events such as these are discourse in the mainstream media. Our discourse otherwise needs to make it more normal, make it more acceptable for the people to raise these issues. Zafar mentioned stats from US and from India. The problem with Pakistan is we don't have data collection, and we don't have enough people coming forward. We don't have enough people coming forward because our media and our people are quick to put the camera into their faces even before the proceedings have concluded. And everybody needs to be responsible, right? So all the actors in the society have a responsibility for us to handle issue of harassment. There are a few other things that I wanted to raise, and please jump in whenever you must. What we've seen as a practicing lawyer after the 18th Amendment is the issue of jurisdiction. After the 18th Amendment, the concurrent list was dissolved, and what has happened after that is provincial governments of Punjab and KP, they've enacted their own laws. And there are a couple of judgments from Punjab, the Lahore High Court, starting from, and if I may cite this very quickly, Salim Javed case, it's PLD 2016, Lahore 433, that restrict the application of the Act of 2010 to the extent of federal areas. This is even though clear mandate in the Constitution, Article 143 and entry number 13 in the 4th schedule that allows for the application of the Act nationwide. And this is where our lawmakers need to sit and clarify the jurisdiction of the federal ombudsman. People lodge their complaints here in Islamabad, only to find out that they had to go to the provincial ombudsperson. In the process, they lose 2 to 3 years. So this is a problem that needs to be fixed. There are a few other problems that we've also seen during the course of our practice. And I'm sorry, I will delve into legalese here. I'll try not to make it more pronounced, but the problem with the laws is you're constrained by how we define the terms in the way we write law. So the Act of 2010, organization is liberally defined, employee is liberally defined, employer is liberally defined, workplace could be reviewed, although it is liberally defined. However, harassment needs to be reviewed. Harassment is bad, period. Our Act of 2010 only talks about sexual harassment and everything that has a nexus with sexual harassment. So somebody who makes a workplace hostile for somebody else, a colleague, and I would not view harassment purely from a power dynamic lens, because that restricts the scope of harassment. You can harass your colleagues as well. Unless it has a sexual undertone, the tribunal will not seize of the matter. We need to liberalize the definition of sexual harassment and include all kinds of acts, conduct, expression, oral or otherwise, and cover it within the scope of harassment, expanding its scope. And there's a judgment actually of the Islamabad High Court that has closed the doors of liberal interpretation of the word sexual harassment. And just for your view, very quickly, it is Shaina Masood case PL 220 PCS 186. These are some of the things that we've observed, and I think that our HR teams, and we have HR experts here as well, in the organizations should take input from the legal counsel and sensitize all workers on issues concerning harassment in their organizations.
Ummar, thank you so much for that. I just have a few points. You're absolutely right that the 2010 Act focuses primarily on sexual harassment. There was a bill, I think, that covered other aspects of harassment as well. Do you know that whether that bill has actually been enacted and whether there are any other reforms in the pipeline relating to harassment?
So Sana, thank you for this question. The 2 or 3 other avenues where you can lodge your complaints. One is obviously under PPC section 509. Again, it only talks about sexual harassment. However, when you talk about space, Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act, it talks about cyber stalking, and there harassment is liberally defined. It covers every kind, harassment in all its forms and manifestations. That particular, I'm not sure if it's seen light of the day. I think it's probably not. But given our existing enactment, I think there's several things that we need to review to bring greater clarity for people who wish to seek benefit in Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Ummar. For those of you from Pakistan who are not aware of the legalities surrounding harassment, please Google the 2010 Protection for Women Against Harassment Act and also the Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act 2016 for more information. Obviously, if you have any legal questions, please feel free to ask Ummar or myself. Ummar, once again, thank you. So, I know that we're actually running out of time and there is just so much that we can learn from all of these panelists, but I think that you're all very busy people. So if we can just come to an end with Anushae Shroff, who is our final panelist. Anushae, are you there?
Yes, I'm very much here, Sana.
Okay, great. Lovely to see you, Anushae. So Anushae is an activist. And Anushae has been with Rotary International as well. You are a writer. And Anushae, I'd like to ask you, what is your take on this issue of sexual harassment?
So I think I'm going to start off with the fact that anything that you find inappropriate, right? Whether that is something that somebody said to you or inappropriate way of addressing you or touching you. I know that Sana, you and myself have discussed that. So the senior female CEOs also have reported that they've been called names like honey, sweetie, babe. And so I think when we have women like Shanta and Hira, who mentioned that it's a bit of a power struggle, I would like to think that each case is different, and I wouldn't paint it with one brush. But yes, I would think that in some contexts, women are made to be infantilized, so made to be childlike or submissive, or even let's say demean them. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's fair. And I think that it doesn't just necessarily include verbal. So it could mean that maybe at your workplace, somebody stares at you repeatedly, yes, and you find that inappropriate, or somebody's following you around, that have, you know, those are some of the instances. Or even sexist comments that you may not like, such as go home and bake cookies. I've had people you know, who've reported that their male colleagues said that, you know, they should go home and bake cookies and they shouldn't be here. Or some sort of you know, suggested emails or texts. And I think it gets a bit complicated when these things are happening after post work hours. So like if you're in the workplace from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, and you're staying a bit after to wrap up some work, and you're coming into contact with your colleagues and after work hours, but you're in the workplace, I think things get a bit tricky there as well. I think things also get tricky when you're in the common area and you're on break time. So you're in the cafe having coffee, everybody's sort of like more relaxed. And I think a bit of the banter kind of starts then. And I think that I would like to think that people are aware as to who is participating in it, right? So I think one of the things that I would like to highlight here is that what you allow continues, right? Like if you're somebody who's in the workspace and you're laughing at some of these jokes, or even if they're not being directed at you, but you're allowing that, so you're sort of creating
normalizing it.
Yeah, you're normalizing it. You're just saying, hey, yeah, you know, this is sort of how things are. This is our culture. And then eventually that becomes the culture of the company. Absolutely. Now, when it becomes the culture of the company, that's when you would know, Sana, this best. When you look at recruitment and hiring, you see that whether you're a cultural fit or not, right? So eventually, when you are in such a situation where you have experienced let's say, you know, harassment of some form, and you are now thinking of, let's say, reporting it, right? So you have two options: either you report it, or you just let it go the first time, and the next time you perhaps confront the person and be like, you know, I'm not okay with what you said, or I would like to just let you know that please avoid or refrain from doing that next time. And I think it gets a bit more tricky, because then, of course, as we have the legal experts here, and myself having a minor in law as well, and whatever I have experienced in the world, I think when you have to document. Now, documenting gets a bit tricky, right? Because either that's via email, or you've got recordings, or now a lot of the smartphones come with video recordings or audio recordings. So you are able to do that, because you do, I mean, you have to have proof in order to report the accused, right? And I think that also eventually you have to go as per your company policies. I think now a lot of the companies have a zero tolerance for any sort of harassment. So you are made aware the first day when you get your appointment letter, right? Like that, this is what our company's culture is like. And, you know, in case of these instances, just like, you know, that, hey, that's the back door is the fire exit, right? You know how to conduct these things. So you have to report it according to your company policy. If you need to consult a lawyer, you have access to a lot of lawyers who are not just, you know, going to be like demanding high fees, but you can have a pro bono consultation as well. And of course, I think and last but not the least, right, in a perfect world, there would be no such thing as sexual harassment, right? And then in a slightly less perfect world, it would be reporting of sexual harassment. So I think, unfortunately, sometimes you're just at a crossroads, and you kind of have to be like, hey, I don't think I'm any longer a fit for this company, because if that's the culture, then that's the culture, right? And so you're not a fit there. It's best that you part ways and you move on to something else. I think that's how I look at it, and that's sort of I think my message to people, right? But of course, to each their own, how they would like to go about it. And like I said, that follow your company's policy, right? And now a lot more companies with a lot of female leadership at the top, that's changing. We are advocating for this type of behavior to be mitigated. We can't promise that it's going to stop. I think that the fact that we are having webinars like these and we're having dialogues and conferences and summits, I think that's the way forward. And I don't think that this should be the reason that women shouldn't come out into the workplace, right? Like, I feel like this should not deter you. And sometimes this is the reason why women don't come out, because they're like, oh, if we come, we're going to get sexually harassed, or we're going to be harassed. So might as well just stay at home and bake cookies. I don't think that solves the problem. I think the more women, men come out, and even like I said, the men can be harassed as well. I'm just saying that predominantly the systems that we have in place so far are obviously more conducive for men and more welcoming for men, and not as welcoming to women. And so we want to make workplaces more welcoming for all genders, right? I think we're just talking about binary genders here, but trans people as well. I know that in Canada, when I lived there, we had a quota. So we had a quota for the trans people as well, and that's happening in Pakistan as well with some of the leading corporates. So I think that there's a lot of trainings around sensitization around how to deal with transgender people as well. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think that change is always incremental. Unfortunately, I wish we had a magic wand and we could just change things, but it doesn't happen like that, right? And so I think we need to train women also as to how they need to behave in the workplace, because I think sometimes women are also missing that. The finesse that they need to bring to the workplace, and how they need to carry themselves as well. And of course, obviously, our workspaces need to be welcoming to anybody who is great talent and wants to add value. So I think that's what I have from my end. If you had anything to add, please feel free to hop on.
Excellent points, Anushae. Thank you so much. Very eloquently conveyed. I absolutely agree. We just, we have some time constraints. So I just want to personally thank all of the panelists for being here. Shanta, Hira, Nida, Ummar, Anushae, thank you so much. I have personally learned a lot from each and every one of you, and I'm sure that most of the participants also have. I will hand it over now to Zafar Saab before we actually move on to the question and answer session. Zafar Saab, please, over to you.
Thank you, Sana. What a brilliant flow of ideas and thoughts, and what a great panel. Anushae deliberations are very interesting. Ummar made a brilliant legal aspect, which is complemented by Sana also. All these things are there. You can have laws, and there are laws on many things. This is harassment, but on many things. But does presence of a law actually help eliminate that menace from society? That's a big thing. That's the thing which raises question about the judiciary, about the jurisprudence, about the limitations of the judiciary. And who else has seen the limitations of judiciary better than we in Pakistan? We see in the history, examples of corruption, blatant corruption, and we see the helplessness of our judges to let out the criminal, the terrorist, for lack of evidence. So we don't want to really go there. But yes, we should have laws, and we should have a greater implementation capability, and we should have obviously systems which are in place and which can circumvent the complexities of legal limitations. I don't know how will that happen. I don't know. It's not only Pakistan. In India, the people who demolished the mosque, Supreme Court, after so many years of trial, has let them go for lack of evidence. So what is evidence? I mean, sometime it would be a pleasure to have Ummar, Sana, and of course all the lawyers here to sit, and I would like to understand, what is it, that blatant thing, the video clips of the person who ran over a police constable, a video clip which the whole nation has seen, was not considered evidence enough. So what else? You come to the topic. I mean, that's the challenge that I keep asking myself. And some point in time, we need to maybe have a webinar on the evidence. Ammar, it will be really nice of you to enlighten us. How can we, or the legislation, come up with something gives that enable the judiciary to actually, they know the criminal, but they can't prosecute. Let him go. So examples. On the side of, the sexual harassment that we talked about the society, about the institution. One of the key learnings to me is creating awareness and giving the strength to the aggrieved party. And I like somebody mentioned in Paki, I think it was Anushae, you, harassment does not always have to be a lady being harassed by men. I mean, there are examples, rare though, where men are also harassed. And I have a live example. I was working in Beat Bank when we inducted ladies, and I was very conscious of possibility of sexual harassment or something in 1,400 branches all over, in a culture where they had not seen girls working with them. So sure enough, it happened one day. I got a call that Mr. So-and-so of this branch is harassing this girl. And I asked the lady there who was the relationship manager. She saw the SMS messages and told me, yes, he is guilty. And then, if I have the legal process to follow, perhaps I will never be able to fire him. But we have in the agreement something, the 30 days notice, which is a simpliciter. So I just gave that notice to the person that, okay, your services are no more required. Here is the 30 days pay, you go. And once you fire it. So the idea was to establish a principle of zero tolerance. Because if you go to tolerance, the message is that it is an acceptable behavior. So that's separate. I don't want to go into that. But interestingly, one day a gentleman came with a similar complaint that this girl here, she's been, teasing me. And we said, how does that happen ever? I mean, there are many who would like to welcome the situation, but how do you have that? So he came up and he showed the similar evidence. And then I was in a dilemma, how do I deal? And then I asked my lady relationship manager, what should we do? He said, even-handed. So we fired the girl. So just for your example, just for your information, in Pakistan there are examples, but that's possible in a corporate sector. Today, I was the whole day with the public sector. My God, impossible to do anything against any employee. Harassment is one thing. Saying mashallah is one thing. I mean, I don't think you can go and prosecute on the tone thing. How do you produce that tone? But education of women is very important. Awareness is very important. And I think that is happening slowly in Pakistan. A lot needs to be done. Some of the TV media, I think they're doing a good job. There was one particular drama that reminds me of, that I'm reminded of, was on Aham TV. It was called Udari. I don't know how many of you seen it, but it is about a rural girl who was harassed and who was actually raped by her stepfather. And the whole society came on to keep her quiet. Don't do anything, nothing will happen. And she took it upon herself. And there is a live example. This was a drama in our own Pakistan. Ammar, you might remember this girl, this lady who actually wrote a book, and what was her name? Some Bibi.
Muhtara Mai, I think.
Muhtara Mai.
Muhtara Mai. So she is a girl from a very obscure, small area in the rural, very, very feudal culture where the society, the Jarga system already decided, but she decided to stand and she made an example. And that's a great example. Not everybody can be a Muhtara Mai and all. But as activists, as social activists, I think there's a lot to be done. Awareness is to be created, and we need to do a lot more. I know we have run how many minutes over? 10 minutes over. But I'm still happy if you guys want to ask any question to the panelists maybe we should take 3 questions and then wish you all goodbye. And then we say we'll continue it from where we leave it. Okay, and Sana? So there are 3 questions addressed to you. You can open your mic and talk. That's better. I think it'll be preferred if you open your mic and talk.
Sure. So anybody who has a question, please turn your mics on and please put forward your question for the panelists.
Hi, it's Wei Ling. I'm one of Sana's friends from the UK. I'm currently in London working from home. But I've been listening to the very interesting topics and conversations that people have been having this evening, your time, afternoon, my time. And one question I sort of the theme that I've heard quite consistently talk about was training and helping women understand what their what can their role be in society and in the workplace. But what kind of training or opportunities are there for men to understand how they should be treating women? For example, in London, I've been on a few training courses in my workplace where it's kind of gender neutral, and it just says this kind of behavior is not acceptable. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, black, white, whatever. There are just certain things that you can or cannot do in the workplace, and that extends not only to sexual harassment, but also sex discrimination, but other things that make the workplace unbearable to some people. And for an example, I'd like to draw upon like the Goldman Sachs policy, where they have made relationships in the workplace completely banned. Is there something like that that's a theme in Pakistan at the moment?
Wei Ling, thank you so much for asking these questions, and it's really good to see you. Just going off track over here, but I've known Wei Ling since King's College, so we've known each other for years and years, and she's one of my best friends. So thank you. Does anyone want to address the questions that Wei Ling has raised?
So I want to address this. I think this is a very important question, and that's been one of my major concerns, that, you know, a lot of men are willing and they want to help and they don't know what to do. Even in an organization, if you witness harassment, what exactly it is, what are the steps you should take, right? So I think those trainings are missing. And I would now like to take this opportunity to talk about an initiative which Zafar Saab is an ambassador for, because he volunteered, and I've picked him as one of our chief male ambassadors. And the concept is called Hira Ali, in which we have, you know, highlighted all the behaviors which can help women at workplace or outside. And we wish to get this translated in Urdu. And we're also hoping to make videos on consent, on, you know, the language and the behavior. And we're going to share this, but I think this is something which is much needed. And I don't think we give enough. I mean, even women don't have that training. They don't know how to identify harassment, but then, you know, even for women, that's a problem. But for men, it's even more, because even if they want to help, they often don't know from where to start and what exactly can they do. So this document, basically this campaign, highlights all that you can do as a man at your workplace or outside within your family, you know, with your friends and colleagues. And it lists all the behaviors, which I'm going to be sharing with this on the LinkedIn post, Sana, if you want. And then we're going to get this translated in Urdu. And so first up, I'll take your help if, you know, Accelerate is willing to push this initiative. So then we're going to translate this in Urdu and, you know, share this across, but it's much needed.
Definitely, Hira.
Thank you so much.
It's really a pleasure. And, you know, I feel that it's one of the best values any gentleman can add to the cause. And, you know, today you are introduced to Sana, who is my champion in Pakistan. She can be aligned with you. And we can use our forum. We can use our platform. We've got Accelerate Learning Forum. We can put your links there after today's thing. And perhaps I'm going to, one thing that I do very jealously is after these learning sessions, I try and make a small summary and I try and put it on the LinkedIn. And my request is for all the participants to please visit the LinkedIn link. And, I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm hoping that actually this session is being recorded. Some phenomenal learning points have been floated today. And it's unbelievable. There is so much to really learn and do something about it. And, it's very little. We are only touching the tip of the iceberg. There's so much to be done. And, these are the forums, these are the platforms. Why does there have to be one forum, one platform? I mean, this should be like a viral thing all over. Let's create awareness. Urban, rural, colleges, universities, and try and make people I think the point raised by Adia Wong was great. I think training of people, what is the expected behavior from gentlemen? What is the expected behavior from ladies? And, it makes me tilt towards my very conservative state of mind where we talk about, the dress codes in the office and all. And, why do we want to have decent dress codes in the office? What is decent? Again, these are very, very subjective things. Where does decent start? Where does it stop? But trust me, I'm telling you as a man, and there are many gentlemen here, we are human. Like girls, the boys are also human. So dress does make an impact on their thought process in their mind and their thinking. So I don't know. I mean, I believe it for you girls to decide how to raise and address that awareness within the society we live in. What is acceptable? What is moderate? And what is provocative? I mean, these are the things. Question. It's very, very controversial here. I don't want to enter, but I guess your forum, Hira, can perhaps raise this. What are the occasions? How do you dress for what occasions? And like Adia was saying, gentlemen, how do you behave? In what situation? How do you behave? How do you compliment a lady? How do you stop complimenting a lady? Zero. I'm not sure many girls will be, or many ladies will be happy in a zero compliment scenario. I mean, you dress up well, you look well. So, sometimes you do want people to say, mashallah, you're looking well. But then, it's mashallah, what to? Is it sort of,
you compliment her on her work, on her output, on her, on her professional competence, and you leave the looks aside.
That's a learning. So, I picked that learning immediately.
I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely, Zafar Sahab. You're not there to stroke her ego and to tell her how pretty she's looking.
We've taken classes, we've been together and everything. You've been helping me in lectures and all. There is society you've lived, you've been brought up in a co-education society and everything. So I'm sure you know how societies and psyches and human minds react, and individually there are people who are different people. Some people will have a different kind of expectation from society, some different. So it's a very complex, it's not only complex, it's a very, very complicated and complex subject to get into. But one thing is very clear, at least it is our responsibility to educate people, to tell them how to behave, to tell them how to dress for the occasion, how to react, the gestures, the women. I mean, Hira, you will bear me out. In university or college, if there is a girl who is well, it doesn't even have to be the dress and all, but just the body language and the way you carry yourself. Nobody will dare say anything if the person is read differently. If you're the way you're carrying, with the demeanor you are carrying, the respect and command that you carry. And, people don't dare. Nobody can dare to say anything in fact. But we don't know that. And therefore some girls maybe, or some boys maybe, they flow this way or that way.
What you're saying is I understand what you're trying and saying, and I think in a college environment, in a workplace environment, it might be relevant given our culture. Yes, the dress code might have a difference, but right now what we do need to target is the mentality. Unfortunately, you do see that sexual harassment happens irrespective of what the woman was wearing, even if, And especially when you talk about rape, you know, babies are raped, animals are raped, old women are raped, women in the graveyards are raped, you know, and women in burqa are raped. So it's the mentality which you want to address. Yes, you know.
That is the sickness. That is unfortunately is becoming more rampant now. Obviously, this is not a normal.
There has to be a dress code at, you know, at work. I mean, I'm totally up for it. Definitely, there has to be a certain dress code for men and for women. It's equally applicable, and particularly if you talk from Pakistan point of view, it's you know, it's say to the believing men to lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and say to the believing women to lower their gaze and guard their modesty. So it's applicable to men and women. But yes, I think we also need to sort of target the mindset, which is also really important.
Absolutely. Agree with you 200%. By the way, I'm not suggesting any dress code or anything. I'm just suggesting an independent, your own evaluation and thought process. If you feel appropriate that this is, you know, okay for a certain place, it's fine. I'm nobody to say that. I'm just highlighting a human aspect of it, which is a reality. Nida, whatever you do and say, this is a reality, the human side of it. And I think it will be very naive of us to totally deny that they are all angels sitting there. They are humans sitting there. And you know, human, when you start right from the creation of the first human, it's created with not in a perfect form. If God wanted to create human in a perfect form, we all would be angels. We are human because we have been created imperfect. So we have to, unless we actually understand and recognize this reality, we will be, you know, perhaps will be again very naive to say that this law will help and this education will help and this teaching will be helpful. And, you know, our value system, it has been totally eroded. I mean, in front of our eyes, you know, from what it used to be in my early days versus what it is now. What lot of things have become acceptable within families, Hira. I mean, use of, you know, in front of children or children. I mean, I was surprised. You go to a Mehndi party, these kids, you know, coming up with alcohol and hash and everything is so rampant in the family functions. And then, you know, I mean, so that is an environment. We can't totally detach ourselves from the environment. But anyway, I better shut up. Sana, I'm dip now.
That's fine. So any other questions? I think we can quickly probably just take one or two more and then we can wrap up.
ये मेरा एक क्वेश्चन है जो मैडम हिरा अली थी उन्होंने बताया था कि एनीथिंग व्हिच मेक्स यू अनकंफर्टेबल इज हरासमेंट। अगर ये बात सही है तो हमारे पाकिस्तान में होता ये है कि बेसिकली